Verification. I was speaking with a friend. This particular friend is an atheist, and the biggest problem he has with Christians is their tendency to insist that their religious beliefs should dictate public policy, though he did acknowledge that not all Christians behave this way. Aside from that, one of his biggest concerns was that Christianity, unlike natural science, involves knowledge that is not shared with the rest of the human race. Because of this restricted scope of knowledge, Christianity is not open to the kind of communal verification that science is, and so is naturally suspect by someone who sees natural science as bringing many insights to the table about what we know and how we know it. This got me to thinking, as I'm a committed Christian who also believes that natural science has some interesting things to share with people of faith. Indeed, many of the most significant topics in natural science, though I must admit I am speaking here most especially within the fields of physics and philosophy of science, are, or at least ought to be, particularly exciting for Christians. Through this and my continued reading of Thomas F. Torrance, who was a brilliant Scottish theologian who was also widely respected as a philosopher of science, I've had to think through the nature of verification within natural science and theological science, to use Torrance's language, which I think is wonderful. How does verification happen within the natural scientific community? That is to say, how do scientific theories and ideas get accepted throughout the scientific community and, down the line, accepted by ordinary non-scientists? This is an incredibly long process, as the implications of key insights such as relativity theory are only dimly grasped, if that much, by non-scientists. I say this with no condemnation, as I have only recently begun to understand some of the more basic implications of it, and, though I have a degree in mathematics, I'm still lost in the math of relativity. What happens is one scientist has an insight, either through surprising results from an experiment or through theoretical reflection and speculation regarding how to best explain a set of data. Once this insight is had, they write up a paper of some kind to share this insight or theory. The question that we need to answer is, how do other people verify what that one scientist has written? At the end of the day, they need to actually go through effectively the same process as the first scientist went through to have the insight in the first place. This is made easier, of course, because they do not need to be trailblazing pioneers. They do not need to make the discovery for the first time. They have a guide who can tell them where to go and what to do to have the same insight or experience that they had. Now you might say to me, that isn't totally necessary. For example, we can find many cases of people verifying a result through totally different means, a significant one being Avogadro's number, which was verified in many ways. This is true, but if we're being precise, getting the same result through different means is not the same as verifying a particular scientific discovery. What it means is that two different scientific discoveries corroborate each other in a remarkable way, which, while surely significant for science in its own way, is not verifying the original experiment. The only way to verify that the original experiment does indeed lead to the results that are claimed for it is to actually go and do it yourself. What does this mean? It means that as most people are not scientifically competent to verify all the claims of every scientist, nor would they even begin to have the time to do so, most people do not actually go through the trouble of verifying the claims of natural science. This is not a sign of laziness, nor is it a sign of a radically misplaced trust, because though not everyone in the world verifies a particular theory, there are several other scientists throughout the whole scientific community who have verified the claims and are competent to do so. We implicitly place our trust in scientific experts who assure us that the findings of one of their own are valid. What's amazing is that this method of verification is not something unique to natural science, nor can we say that they were the first to use it. Actually, this was effectively the same as a theological insight in the early church, 4th century at the latest. For some reason, people today want to verify theological claims on distinctively non-theological grounds. That is, claims made by the Bible are judged to be true or false based on how those claims are related to philosophy in general or to particular human experience. The problem with this is that it presupposes that the truth or falsity of theological claims, theories to use the scientific term, can somehow be determined outside of the actual ground from which they arise. This would be like saying that relativity can't be true because it doesn't agree with my particular brand of personal philosophy. However, early church thinkers knew that this is not an appropriate way to evaluate theological claims. Athanasius of Alexandria, quite possibly one of the, if not the, greatest theologian in the history of the church, at the end of his famous work on the Incarnation said, "But for the searching of the Scriptures and true knowledge of them, an honorable life is needed. and a pure soul, and that virtue which is according to Christ, so that the intellect guiding its path by it may be able to attain what it desires, and to comprehend it insofar as it is accessible to human nature to learn concerning the Word of God. For without a pure mind and a modeling of the life after the saints, a man could not possibly comprehend the words of the saints. What he's getting at is that it's not possible for just anyone to understand the Bible. Indeed, true knowledge of the Scriptures is only available to people who lead the kind of life that is consistent with biblical teaching, who commit themselves to the truth to which the Bible bears witness, who allow reality as mediated by the Scriptures to shape how they think, are able to have true knowledge of the Scriptures. Without a pure mind and a pure life, Athanasius claims, the Bible will always be confusing. To the non-Christian, this seems somewhat esoteric. That is, that knowledge is only open to a select few. My contention is that it is not any more esoteric than the findings of science. After all, as I pointed out earlier, most people do not go through the trouble of verifying scientific claims. Many people build things like computers even though they do not understand relativity theory, without which such machines would be impossible, or even beginning to comprehend the mathematics involved in the Lorentz transformation. But they shouldn't feel bad. Even a PhD in mathematics that I knew didn't understand it, and neither do I. Though not everyone is able to go through the process to verify particular insights or theories, everyone has the capacity to trust the experts in the field and appropriate their key insights to their lives, even if they do not fully understand them. Christians saying that one must change their lifestyle and submit to the authority of God in order to understand God is fundamentally no different, at least in form and design, from scientists insisting that people must change their lifestyles so that they might become scientifically competent and submit to the authority of the reality that they are investigating in order to understand it. This means that, at least on purely theoretical grounds, the demand for Christians to prove the existence of God and the basic claims of the Christian faith are not any more intrinsically reasonable than to insist that anyone who affirms the legitimacy of science prove the core ideas of relativity theory or any other difficult topic. However, I have a hard time thinking that this conviction will be widely accepted. So if both science and theology are such that one must become part of a particular community of either scientifically or theologically competent people, and live a certain way, developing certain skills to know what the respective fields claim to know, why is this widely accepted without problem for science and not for theology? Is it because science is more intrinsically relevant for our daily lives? Not necessarily. After all, though our whole way of life is now heavily dependent on scientific insights over the last 100 years or so, our Western world is deeply indebted to the Judeo-Christian tradition for their ethical standards. It's amazing to notice that those who claim the belief in God is not necessary to be an ethical person hold basic ethical standards that line up remarkably well with distinctively Judeo-Christian values, such as the intrinsic worth of human beings, which underlies condemnations of murder and the affirmation of other rights. So why trust scientists and not theologians? I think another friend of mine, who would also, it happens, is an atheist, captured it quite well. He said, "You don't say a model is true or false. You say if it's helpful or not." What he meant was that saying science is reliable is a model for our lives that has proved to be helpful, which is why many people who are not scientifically competent live that way. The question that we have to deal with is, why do we trust scientists and not theologians or Christians more generally? The sober truth, I believe, is that while scientists have shown consistently that their theories hold true under scrutiny and they make no moral judgments, although I'm led to believe that some scientists see science as involving a moral imperative, Christians have not been nearly so reliable. Christians have taken firm moral stances and then not even followed them themselves. We claim an absolute standard and then live as if we didn't really believe it. We say that God is love and then we act in hatred toward others. We claim that what really matters is Jesus, and then we turn around and behave as if our stances on abortion or homosexuality are equal to, if not greater, than Christ himself. When someone who's not a scientist looks at the scientific community, they say, "There is a group of people who give themselves entirely to their field, and their work yields helpful things for me in my life." On the contrary, many people who are not Christians look at the Christian community and say, "There is a group of people who are just as steeped in sin as I am, if not more so. However, they look down on me for my sin while being totally unaware of their own. What they do is so far from being helpful in my life, it often feels that they're actively trying to limit my freedom." When that is a common, if unfortunate, view of the church, how can we be surprised that people take science more seriously than God? At least the scientists seem to be serious about their field. As many, if not all of you know, I myself am a committed Christian. So you're probably thinking that this could not possibly be a let's bash the Christians note. And you'd be right. However, if it is indeed a call to be more faithful, there are those who would claim that Christianity has been dominant in the Western world since the moment it came into existence. This is not true. The church was widely persecuted in its earliest centuries and was hated by many. Eventually, it is true that Christianity fell into favor with the Roman government, but it had been impressing people long before that, even in the midst of persecution. The Christians did not gain their power by insisting that the government pass distinctively Christian laws, though they did humbly ask to stop being persecuted. They did not go around telling everyone what sinners they were. Rather, they shared their lives together. They lived with joy, and their lives were characterized by love. These things were not diminished, but rather amplified with the countless martyrs. The influence that Christian faith came to have at the price, it came at the price of many Christians' lives. We've lost sight of the sheer force of the gospel. I say that because we behave as if somehow we needed to defend it. The gospel is intrinsically relevant to our lives. Perhaps if we as a whole devoted ourselves to the God we worship, if we were absolutely committed to living in obedience to God by being conformed to the image of Christ by the power of the Holy Spirit, the non-Christian world would look at the Christian community and say, I do not yet understand what they say about God, but I'm convinced that they're on to something. I'm not advocating a non-verbal evangelism, as I think we need to bear witness to the transformational power of Christ, but rather a totally embodied faith that permeates every aspect of life, including the community of believers.